Tim, early on in the film, we're only getting audio descriptions of the situation, and it creates a really tense atmosphere, and it allows viewers to really use their imagination. Can you speak to just limiting the perspective? Because I feel that really works to the film's strength, even though I imagine that, it's very easy to want to, go straight to the hostage situation and show that, but I feel like really limiting the scope actually helped the film.
I would agree. I'm glad that it felt for you the same. I think our film is drawing a lot of, or it is also about what they don't see rather than what they see. And there are good example already, of course, in film history where something was more frightening, even or intense, because you were actually not showing it, or maybe only hearing it. And we quite early on, once we decided that we want to tell it from the media's angle, we said, like, if we want to have a cinematic concept like this, we got to go really through it. So we show everything from their perspective. And that was, of course, part of the irony that they were so close, but they were in their studio. And we studied also a lot of movies that are playing with that. For example, a movie I want to mention is Das Boot by Wolfgang Petersen, a submarine movie where you also with that crew in that trapped in that tight space, and the only thing that you see from this major event going on the surface is via the telescopes and the sonars.
Yeah, that's a great comparison to Dispute. That makes complete sense. And Moritz, I read that you were born in Munich a decade later, but I'm sure those events were always looming and referenced. What made you really want to, examine these events in a professional realm with this film?
I think, yeah, I was born and raised in Munich, and my parents were both born and raised in Munich as well. And when Tim and I found this perspective of the media, we were both intrigued because we are both like also in media as filmmakers. And I come from a documentary background, and before that, I was a TV journalist. So I really clicked with that approach. But on the other hand, like you said, I'm from Munich, and I try to channel like the stories my parents told me because they're exactly the age of the one character, Marianne played by Leonie Benesch, who is like a translator, and she has so high hopes in this serene games and showing the world this new liberal face of the young Germany. And I really could kind of channel my parents' stories in her because they were exactly the same age and they had so high hopes too. And I think the whole generation had. So I really wanted to bring in this aspect as well to provide some context why the games were like structured like that, why they set up this unprecedented technical apparatus to show everything to the whole world, and why, for example, there was no armed police in the Olympic Village. And yeah, I thought that they kind of added something to the story to get this German perspective as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you have a journalism background because, Tim, I wanted to ask you about this. I feel like this film is kind of more relevant than ever just because, it is this examination of broadcast journalism and that balance between seeking the truth and also finding an angle that does well and performs well with ratings. What did you find most interesting about showing their methods of coverage since it's very easy for them to kind of forget that lives are at stake when they're just viewing it as a story?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to compare it to my work that I did, but I worked a lot as not directly, but I worked a lot as a cinematographer for documentaries in my student times because at the film school, as Moritz said, we were in the same film school, and he was also in the documentary department at the beginning at least. No, you stayed there, of
I
course.
stayed there. I stayed there.
but I worked for a lot of directors at this documentary directors as a DP, and not even nearly want to compare what we were filming with, but it was also due to the tragedy of Munich, but it was also dark subjects partly. So I know a little bit of that feeling what you just described, where you want to stay respectful of the situation, but you also want to find an image in a way. And so in a way, to a lot of these questions that this crew gets confronted with in our movie, I could relate to from my previous work. So that's also why I responded so well to that angle. But sorry, that was maybe not your question. You have to really say again what.
Oh no, that completely answered it.
Yeah. Okay.
And Moritz, I wanted to ask you, since you and the rest of the writers got this great honor of being nominated for Best Original Screenplay, what does it mean for you when you see that recognition, especially at the film's biggest stage at the Oscars?
This is this is really strictly unbelievable to us. I mean, you have to know that we started with this movie at Venice at the film festival, which sounds very fancy, but actually we were in the sidebar, and we were in the sidebar of the sidebar. So we were so lucky that journalists like you just picked it up and saw it and wrote about it and enabled this great journey until now. So this feels like an unbelievable journey as the whole journey. But when we heard that we are nominated, we were overwhelmed with joy. But I think we're still waiting for that realizing moment, because really realized it's not really realized by now, because it's something that is really hard to realize until I think you're standing there or sitting there, and even then I don't know if I can realize it.
Congrats
I
to you
also hope
both.
that I mean, the movie is out right now. You can watch it right now in the cinema. Also, I hope it also motivates people to go and see it. That's of course a great thing about the awards, right? Is that it helps to get attention to movies. So I'd hope it motivates people to actually go buy a ticket and see it.
Yeah, it's definitely worth seeing. And Tim, one of the aspects I really liked about the film was the usage of archival footage. I thought that was deployed very smartly. Was that always in the script, or how did you kind of find your balance there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, it was an interesting process because for a long time we didn't have the whole footage, and we're still not 100% sure if we have seen everything. But only shortly before shooting, we worked for a long time with everything you'd find online or in documentaries, and then not too long before shooting, we suddenly received another hours of footage, and that was like, in a way, like I don't know, it was very inspiring, but also scary because we knew there were so many things that we saw in this footage that we knew, okay, we have to have this in the footage. I give you an example in our film. To give you an example, the moment when they stopped the interview with the athlete who could escape in the morning because they're losing the slot on the satellite. This is something we would never come up with. But of course, it makes sense because back then you still had to book this. There were not so many slots in the satellite. You still had to book a slot. And this is something that, of course, immediately was so important for our topic, right? That we had to include it. So we structured the script accordingly again, very late in the process. And on the other hand, we knew that certain scenes in the Olympic Village we would want to recreate. But what we could never recreate is the image of Jim McKay, the host, reporting. And at a certain point, it was even unclear if we would get that footage. And I said, if we don't get McKay, we don't have to do the film at all. We would have done it anyway, maybe, but I'm very glad that we got the copyright, because he has this very unique way of hosting into the camera. And it was only because we had the blessing of the real Jeffrey Mason and also of his son, Sean McManus, that we got the copyright for this footage. But I think it's crucial for the film, especially in the States where McKay is also a well-known face.